Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I'm Rick Bennett. A while back, I presented at the Firm Foundation conference, and I'd like to thank Ryan Nelson from the Firm Foundation for allowing me to share this with you. This is my presentation where we talked about different geography theories, and in this first part, I talked about some stuff that a lot of Heartlanders think is a settled case, which is DNA. And we also talked a little bit about geology. So I actually quote from Simon Southerton, Thomas Murphy, and Ugo Perego. Actually, I let them do their own speaking at the Firm Foundation. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. All right, I'm glad to be here today. Rod and I have a couple of things, or one thing that's in common. We love to talk about the Book of Mormon, especially Book of Mormon geography theories. The difference is Rod thinks there's one and only true theory, and I like to talk about all of them. We're going to go over about 16 today. I actually gave a presentation like this about a year ago, and I've found about 5 new ones in the last 3 or 4 months. So this is going to be new. Some of these are so new that I don't even know that much about them. So anyway, before we go into that, I want to talk a little bit about the main categories of theories. We kind of have internal theories, the old world, which is a little bit more expansive than I think most people go into, the new world, and then the theory that I find least interesting, but the ones who aren't believers in the Book of Mormon, Joseph made it up, so I will give a nod to them just to know that I'm covering everything here, so including that. Before we jump into these theories, one of the things I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some considerations that I think most people don't spend a lot of time talking about. And I had Jerry Grover on. He's actually speaking tomorrow, I understand, here at the Firm Foundation. He has a book, a fantastic book called Geology of the Book of Mormon. And so the idea here is most people haven't looked at the Book of Mormon from a geological point of view. And so Jerry does that. He's got a background in geology. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be giving pros and cons to all the theories. Personally, I am not married to any one theory. I just think it's a fun thing to talk about. And so Jerry thinks that, in 3rd Nephi, the destruction, in order to explain the mists of darkness and the earthquakes and everything, he believes that that sounds a lot like volcanic activity. If you remember Mount St. Helens, big ash cloud. He says actually it took a lot of Mount St. Helens to do what happened in the Book of Mormon. And so he actually, Mesoamerica, I think people are kind of familiar with that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He thinks that's actually a best fit. It has the number of volcanoes and fault lines. There's another theory that we're going to be talking about today, the Yucatan Peninsula, and he says that's the most seismically stable area in Central America. I did ask him about the Heartland theory. The Heartland, most of you here are Heartlanders. He doesn't think the New Madrid Fault fits geologically with the destruction found in the Book of Mormon. So I'm just kind of giving you guys a little preview on that. But, a lot of people have asked him, let's look at some of these other theories. And you're going to see, I think I have 16 of them. And he says, well, it takes a lot of work to actually go through and look at all the papers on volcanoes and that sort of thing. So I've got a link to his book here. If you want to test any theory, the Heartland theory, Baja, Malay, all of them, you can kind of use his book as a guidebook. Another consideration that I think people don't pay much attention to is languages. If we believe that Lehi came to America, there should be some semblance of Hebrew. And so Brian Stubbs has written a book called Changes in Languages from Nephi to Now. And so once again, it's kind of geographically agnostic. He claims that Ute and Aztec languages, known as Uto-Aztecan, bear a lot of similarities to Hebrew. Now, Ute and Aztec people are in the southwest of the United States doesn't really match any current geography theory, perhaps Baja. We'll talk about Baja here in a little bit. But I believe that language of Native Americans and any matches to Hebrew is a very understudied area of the Book of Mormon. And I will even mention this to Brant Gardner, who's a big Meso proponent. And he doesn't like Brian's work, mainly because it didn't match with Meso. So the idea here is Jerry and Brian are two people who are not really here to back up any one theory, although I will say Jerry kind of leans towards Meso. But these are things that I think are two understudied areas here of the Book of Mormon. Now, I know a lot of Heartlanders really like, DNA is a big issue with the Book of Mormon. A lot of people are saying there's no DNA matches to Native Americans. And I know Rod has been a big proponent of the X2A. And one of the things I love about Rod is, and also Jonathan Neville, he wants people to have open ideas and open thoughts about these. And so he's allowing me, and I thank you, Rod, for giving a contrary point of view. And so I've got a little video. This is Simon Southerton. He's not a former believer. He doesn't believe anymore. But he takes issue with the X2A. And so I'm going to let, hopefully you guys will be able to hear this, Simon, from his own words, talk about the X2A DNA match here.
The X is a name for a huge cluster of very ancient family of mitochondrial DNA lineages. So there's an X1 branch, two major branches, X1 and X2. And then in the X2 branch, there's X2A right through to J, I think is the last one. And it's in the X2A or the X2G lineage that we find in Native Americans, mostly X2A, and all of the other X2 lineages are in Eurasia somewhere, and one of them is amongst the Druze, and that's the one that Meldrum has paid all his attention to. It is very distantly related. They share a common ancestor about 30,000 years ago. So his claims are completely wrong. The X2A lineage in Native Americans has been there since the original founders. Ugo Perego's done some beautiful work on the X lineage, and he's found that it's arrived very early on, same time.
Okay, so you're saying that the X2A that's in North America got here before Lehigh did?
Yeah, well, allegedly.
Yeah.
Yes, it got here.
If we believe that Lehigh came here, it would have been, it's too early.
13 or 14,000 years ago or earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so summary, he says it's way too old. Since he mentioned Ugo Perego, I had Ugo on my show as well, and back in 2017, and he talks a little bit more about X2A.
The claim that this particular DNA marker is called X2A, found in North America, is a proof of Book of Mormon remnants or Book of Mormon legacy from the Middle East. It is a good thinking, but it is not founded. Okay, research today, as we have it, as we have today, does not support that at all. In fact, are you familiar with the Kennewick Man?
A little bit.
Kennewick Man was a skeleton found on the Columbia River in the state of Washington, when close to the Canadian border, and is dated between 8,000 to 9,000 years with carbon dating. He has features that look like very much Europeans or non-typical Native American. A few years ago, the whole genetic sequence was done on him, and his DNA is Native American. And he belongs to X2A, which is the same marker that is the one that Rod Meldrum says is for the Great Lakes. But it's found on the northwest coast, close to the Beringia Passage, right? it is the oldest X2A found in America, meaning all the others are a subgroup of that one, so it's been here the longest, right? It's the 8 to 9,000. His autosomal DNA is all Native American, so it's not European, right? But he has this X2A. And so what is, and besides, X2A has never been found in the Middle East. Other X lineages have been found in the Middle East, but not this particular one. And X2A is not younger than the Middle Eastern lineages, meaning it did not come from them genealogically, right? We call it phylogenetically in genetics, which means genealogically you have a father and you have a daughter or a son. You never have the son in your pedigree before you have the father. Does that make sense? That is an order of. So the X2A in America is not a daughter of the X's in the Middle East. As of today, they've never found any X2A in any other part of the world but the Americas, and because of the Kennewick man has these features, it seems to me to point more toward a Beringia arrival like the others. In fact, we are publishing a new paper with a group at the University of Illinois on ancient X2A samples found in Alaska.
Okay. Of course, Ugo was the one who wrote the Gospel Topics essay. He's a population geneticist. I'll just add that as well. And then finally, I know I've been hitting the DNA hard. My last expert here is Dr. Thomas Murphy, who taught at Edmonds College up in Washington.
Basically, there's a branch of the X lineage called X2A that is unique to Native Americans. And this X lineage, there are other branches of X lineage that are found in Europe, in Asia, and in Africa. And Meldrum keys in on that and calls it European DNA or Middle Eastern DNA. Well, yeah, it is found in the Middle East, but it's also found in Europe, it's also found in Asia, it's also African. You could call it African DNA, but that doesn't help his story, right?
Well, that would help with the black Lamanites, right?
Yeah, right. And so he tries to present these other branches of the X lineage as somehow evidence that there were people of Middle Eastern ancestry or ancient Near East ancestry in the Americas. That's not what the DNA evidence shows. That those are separate lineages that never came to the Americas. The only lineage that came to the Americas is that X2A. And it is the X2A, separated, if I remember the dates right, 40,000 years ago, if I remember right.
Which is a little earlier than Lehi, right?
Yeah, I mean, way, way earlier.
So anyway, those are some things that I just wanted to bring up off the top. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about geology and DNA in the Book of Mormon. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about some old world geography theories. Let's talk about the Jedite Crossing. This was something I just found out on Monday. I just added this slide this morning, literally this morning. And there's a guy named Blair Bryant. I believe he's a Community of Christ member. He might not be, but I'm pretty sure he is. He was talking about the Jedites, with their barges, and basically he proposes that the Jedites came across China. Of course, one of the benefits of that is a lot of the DNA experts believe that the Book of Mormon has Asian DNA, and so this would explain why they have Asian DNA. But, they're just bobbing around in the ocean, and it took the Jedites 344 days to cross the ocean. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, subscribe on either Patreon or at gospeltangents.com. For just $5 a month, you can hear the entire audio uninterrupted. On our $10 tier, if you would like to see the whole video, you can see that either on youtube.com/gospeltangents, or I've got a special Facebook group devoted for full videos. So subscribe at gospeltangents.com and sign up for just $10 a month. For $20 a month, if you'd like to get some bonus content, maybe some of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, you can sign up for that. And then if you'd like to talk to me for $100 a month, we'll do a monthly phone call on something like Zoom, and you can ask me anything you want. So thanks again. Also, don't forget about the merch, mugs, t-shirts, hats, things like that. I'm trying to get the ties up there. Hopefully I can get up there. And thanks again for watching Gospel Tangents, and click here for some more videos.